It is nearly 6 p.m., and the rest of the crew has left for the weekend. I love camping alone. My camp is at the base of the sacred Chicoma Peak, at nearly 9,500 feet, and my tent is nestled along a tree line. As I eat my dinner, I look out towards the grassy yellow plain and notice a figure sitting still. It is a bobcat. He sits there in no hurry. He is maybe 200 feet from me. As he turns and looks about, his passive beauty amazes me. He begins to walk through the plain towards the trees I am camped. He hasn't noticed me. As he walks westward, I walk quietly alongside him. There is a run of trees between me and him, and I periodically spot him through the trees as I walk. I stop when he stops, and continue when he continues. He still hasn't sensed me. He turns slightly and is going to intercept the course ahead of me. He disappears for a moment before emerging to my side of the trees. I stop. Now he is directly ahead of me, no more than 20 feet. I can hardly believe it. He stops, still unaware of my presence, then turns his head towards me. I kneel down even further so as to offer him no threat. We look at one another, frozen. I look into his eyes and appreciate this meeting. Wonderfully clear markings on his face give him his individuality and are breathtaking. After a momentary gaze, he turns, bolts into the forest, and disappears. I breathe, smile, and walk back to my tent with my heart soaring. Welcome. My name is Soraya, and this is Wild Roots. As a field biologist, I couldn't imagine a world without wildlife. But research in historic and present trends of wildlife decline sadly points to the real possibility of a future world without wildlife. We are in the midst of a true Holocaust, and this is not our true purpose. And the window in which we can reverse and prevent this outcome is closing fast. Outside of zoos and sanctuaries, the pressures placed on naturally existing ecosystems is often too much to bear for wildlife. The biggest cause is simply loss of habitat. And the biggest threat is not what you might think. Coal and gas are not to blame. Our diet is. Today we will be talking with Dr. Sailesh Rao about the research and efforts he is making to reverse these trends. Welcome. So briefly, I would like to explain what Wild Roots is about and what I want my listeners to know about me and what to walk away with. So for all of my life, I have felt a deep connection to nature and animals. I understood nature. It was an understanding based on balance. I knew that nature required a certain type of balance to be healthy. And one of my earliest observations was of this apparent disconnect that humans had with nature. I felt that there was something wrong with the way people perceive the world. And I believe there is a root wisdom that we all share. When we are young, we know we are a part of nature, and I think many people lose that perception. I think it is something that has never left me. And so the point of this podcast is to present some of these ongoing and accelerating issues, honestly, that we know are happening, but feel at a loss on how to respond to them in a beneficial way. I am guilty as anybody who feels the frustration and the grief and the whole overwhelming sense of it all. But after listening to Wild Roots, I want people to remember their origins and to remember that there's this innate root wisdom within all of us. And that is, we grieve and we get frustrated over what's happening because we love the earth, innately there's this love for Earth that we can't shake. I want people to feel like they belong here instead of feeling terrible to be part of a destructive species, because I've gone through that my whole life. And so my message is that it is so important to connect to Earth and nature every single day, because in our day-to-day lives, we don't regard nature very much, even if it's as simple as greeting the sun in the morning, and simply starting with that. Those connections will carry us far on our journey together. Thank you for taking the time to answer a few questions today. You're actually my first guest.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I'm Sailesh Rao. I'm an engineer by profession. Um, I got my degrees in electrical engineering, and I worked on the internet for 20 years after my graduation. And then I saw Al Gore's presentation on TV in 2005, and I was so shocked. I abandoned my career and started working on the environment full time. And that's what I've been doing for the last 13 years. And in the process, I realized everything that you were talking about, that it's our, the way we connect with nature and the stories we tell about ourselves that matters the most. And, I was raised as a Hindu. And the fundamental axiom of Hinduism is that everything happens for the best. And for the first 4 years after I started studying the environment, I became thoroughly disillusioned. I thought maybe my faith was wrong, that there was something wrong with the story that we are telling ourselves, that everything happens for the best. How could all this be happening for the best? We clearly don't belong on Earth. If you just take human beings out, the Earth would be fine. So those are all the things that came to me, right, as I was studying this. And then in 2010, our granddaughter was born. And when she was about a month old, I came to see her for the first time. And I had this sense of perfection. The exact same sense of perfection that I feel when I go to a forest, pristine forest. So I realized that she belongs exactly as she is. And so, which means that we all must belong exactly as we are, and that we are not telling the right story. And therefore, my faith, the way, the fundamental axiom of Hinduism is actually correct.
Yeah, I have felt that disparagement most of my life, and I've imagined this utopia on Earth without humans.
Right, and then I realized that we do belong exactly as we are, so that we are not telling the right story, right? So then I came back from seeing her, and I started writing my first book. I used the analogy of the caterpillar and the butterfly. The caterpillar is a blind consumer, and so the first few weeks after, the first thing he does when he's born is he eats the shell of the egg he came out of, then he eats the leaf that the egg was on. And, so just a voracious consumer for the first few weeks of his life. And then when he's too big for his skin, he stops. And he hangs under a twig and he meditates for a week, right? And then within the caterpillar, all these amazing things happen. New cells are born called imaginal cells. And at first, the caterpillar's immune system fights these imaginal cells, saying that they don't belong. And then over time, the imaginal cells become more and more numerous, and the caterpillar's immune system gives up. And then these imaginal cells start clumping together to form different organs of the butterfly. And then when the butterfly emerges, the butterfly is a very discriminating consumer. It's no longer blindly eating whatever is in her way. She's sipping nectar from flowers. And in the process, she is pollinating the flowers. She's regenerating life. She's undoing all the damage that happened in the caterpillar phase. So I said, okay, that's exactly where we are. As human beings, we have reached the limit of the caterpillar phase. We have reached the point where we are too big for our skin. And now we are being called. So the imaginal cells are being born. There are all these social justice activists who are rising up. There is animal rights activists. There is, Black Lives Matter. I mean, all these social justice activists are rising up, and these are the imaginal cells for the future. And as at first, of course, the current system is fighting us, saying that we don't belong. But now they're giving up. In fact, we just had a Martin Luther King Day celebration in the city of Mesa, Arizona, and it was the first ever vegan celebration where everything was completely vegan, and it was sponsored by the city of Mesa. So imagine that. So the immune system is basically giving up and saying, we can't stop this. This is going to happen.
It really is amazing to see how many people are adopting this plant-based
Right, right,
whole foods diet.
right. See, plant-based diet to me is like it's one side of it. Uh, it's the if you look at the totality of it, it's really compassion for all life. It's applying the golden rule for all, including animals in our circle of compassion. So diet is just one part of it. Then it becomes your entire lifestyle, right? So you don't wear animals. You don't use them for entertainment. You don't use them for any purpose whatsoever. So it's that uh, recognition that animals are also here in their own right, and that they also have the right to freedom. So when we talk about land of the free, it's all beings are free. It doesn't say just free humans and then all the animals are in cages, right? It's all so we are all free. And so veganism is a way of living that allows us to embrace that and to actually practice that mindset. And that to me is the butterfly. So the vegan world to me is the world of the butterfly. And I'm telling people that we have to get there within the next 7 years. It's not that it's going to happen, in the next 200 years. No, we have to do it within the next 7 years. And let's figure out how we are going to get there.
Could you expand on the research and data behind Project Year Zero?
Right. Right. So I was reading all the literature on ecosystems, and I was noticing that people use the predator-prey model for modeling how human beings are affecting nature. And the predator-prey model, I mean, obviously it's all parameterized, and there is, but the overall trend in the model is that as the prey population declines, predator populations also decline because there's not enough prey for the predators to eat. And so then as the predator population declines, the prey population starts going up again. So you see this dance between the predator and the prey in the population. And that's what they were using for human nature interactions. And I said, that's not true. That's not how we do things. In fact, I know my cousin has a software firm, and he's getting a lot of contracts for big data software to find the last remaining fish in the ocean, where you analyze satellite images and figure out where the fish are, and then direct the ships to go there and catch them. So we are deploying technology to find the last remaining prey as predators. So in the ocean, they have no place to hide. And on land, they're all concentrated in forests. So whenever we want to grow our animal agriculture industry, we are going and chopping down forests. So there is no place for the animals to live. So they die. If they come and interfere with our domestic animals, we kill them. We use helicopter gunships and go kill them. So this is a very it's like an extreme case of the predator-prey model, where the parameter is telling the prey is going to go down to zero before the predator population is going to be affected, right? So it's truly an exponential model. So I said, okay, if it's an exponential model, and between 1970, so between 10,000 years ago and 1970, about 60% of all wild animals were killed off. And then between 1970 and 2010, another 52% got killed off in terms of total biomass. Okay, so I said, if I assume that they were being killed off in proportion to the size of the GDP of the planet, so the proportion to the economy, right? Then how many more years do we have before they're killed off completely? So it turns out between 1970 and 2010, our economy, global economy, in real terms, increased by a factor of 3.8. So our population roughly doubled, but our consumption also roughly doubled. So our economy increased by a factor of 3.8. So if you take an exponential curve that has gone up by a factor of 3.8 in 40 years, and then you extrapolate that out to see how many more years do you need before you wipe out the remaining 48% of the wild animals, that turned out to be 16 years. So then I waited for 2 years because I was so shocked by this calculation. I did this calculation in 2014. And then I waited 2 years to see the next report from the World Wildlife Fund, the Living Planet report. And it said that between 1970 and 2012, 58% of wild animals were so 2012, 58% had gone, they had disappeared. And now, the 2014, they're saying 60%. So there is this, they're also increasing the number of species in their calculation. So there is some measurement error built into this, but roughly it is following the same exponential trend that I was predicting, right? So, and this is on top of the 60% that were lost between 10,000 years ago and 1970. So literally 83% or 84% of wild animals have been wiped out. And I said, you cannot keep doing this and expect the ecosystems to be stable. I mean, this is silly to think that, right? So you cannot keep destroying wildlife at the same pace and expect that they will recover if we stop. So I started sounding the alarm. So that was my year zero video that we did, saying that if we continue at this current pace, by 2026, we'll wipe them all out. And when we wipe them all out, our necks will be on the line.
That video is very much worth watching. I have seen personally in my field work this loss of biodiversity. I've worked in forests that should otherwise be full of life be silenced. It is a very stark feeling to walk through a forest that has a very faint lifeline. We've altered so many of our wild places so that we feel safer in them by removing all these biodiverse elements that make up a healthy system. So in other words, we are controlling nature too much.
Right. The story we have to tell is that we did it for a purpose. So that's what I'm trying to write now. I'm writing this, the thermostat species book theory. So that's a hypothesis that I have. I have a video actually on our website if you take a look at that. And basically, we have to tell a story where we were doing all this for a purpose. And the purpose was to create homeostasis for planet Earth. And we have done that. We have created homeostasis, or we have kept the temperature constant over the last 10,000 years, except over the last 200 years, it's gone up by another 1.2 degrees Celsius, right? But over the first 10,000 years, we kept it constant, but through deforestation. And over the last 200 years, now we have created all the tools and technologies to understand what we did over the first 10,000 years. And then to carry on being the thermostat species for the planet, to bring the temperature back down and keep it constant at the set level without having to deforest. In fact, by bringing back the forest. In fact, that's the only way out we have for climate change. So I say that veganism or compassion is a cure for climate change. So that's the way I'm framing it. Just like a plant-based diet is a cure for heart disease and diabetes and cancer, a compassionate lifestyle is a cure for climate change, for biodiversity loss, for ecosystems collapse, for every one of the known environmental ills, and for social justice issues. See, currently we are organized as a species. We are organized around uh, the economy, around the protection of individual property rights. So this is what all our military and our police and all are doing, protecting a nation's property and protecting an individual's property. So it's about the protection of an individual and putting a boundary around that person and saying, I'll make sure that when you say this is yours, this will be yours, right? So it's all focused around me, and getting things for ourselves, right? So instead, we need to organize our species around the fulfillment of our ecological responsibilities. But we have been conditioned from our childhood onwards to think like that. So this is why you need to change. I mean, everything needs to change. So we had a conference in October in Mesa, Arizona, where we asked questions about what would a vegan world look like. If it was a completely vegan world, what would it look like, and how do we get there? So we came up with a list of questions, and they were in 5 categories. Whether it was economic questions, ecological, spiritual, political, and social. So the 5 categories that we addressed, and we came up with questions, and we put them down, and there are like 250 plus questions there. And then we said, so how do we answer them? And so we formed study groups to address these questions. So we only looked at 12 of those questions to begin with, right? So it starts a conversation as to how do we organize ourselves in this new way. It's a little bit like saying we are at the end of where we are now. We cannot go any further with the way we are doing things. So therefore, the system is breaking down. We see that all around us. We see, dysfunctional governments. We see governments that are deliberately poisoning their citizens, just so that some few people can make money off of the diseases that we get. This is not a healthy way of organizing governments. This is not what we intended, right? We didn't say we were going to elect people to go and kill us. We didn't say we're going to all be factory farmed and to be profit centers for pharmaceutical industry. We never agreed to that. So therefore, we have every right to say, we the people put this in place, and we the people are going to have to change it, right? So again, this is setting up a conversation for around the world. It's not just here. America is just the head of the caterpillar, right? But the caterpillar's body is all around the world. So we literally have to rethink, and we have to involve the faith community and the spiritual community, because they have a lot of grassroots organizations already built in. And to get them to recognize that compassion is the cure for climate change. Compassion is the cure for biodiversity loss, for all of our environmental problems. And therefore, they have a responsibility, to when they talk about compassion, to actually implement it. So it's literally about making us align who we say we are with what we actually do. We say we are compassionate. We say we are animal lovers. And then we go and eat them, right? And you see that disconnect. And you say, no, I mean, this is what Martin Luther King did, right? So he told Americans, you say all people are created equal, and yet you have segregation. All I'm pointing out is that disconnect is systemic. The system is a factory farming system. That's what we have today. Okay? It's a factory farming system. And we are all being factory farmed, not just animals. human beings are also being factory farmed. We are we are being taught all these bad things. You know, eat badly. When you eat badly, you'll become sick as you grow older. You'll become obese and become sick. And therefore, you will become a profit center for pharmaceutical companies and medical companies. I mean, why else would we deliberately feed group 1 carcinogens to our children? That's what we have in school lunches. They're feeding them, yeah, group 1 carcinogens. And you say, did we not see that paper? I mean, did they not read that paper that showed it was a group 1 carcinogen? How can they continue doing this? These are our children that you're talking about. See, so at some point, we as parents have to wake up and say, I'm not going to let my children be farmed into this system, this factory farming system. So I'm going to look for a different way of living, a different way of organizing ourselves. So that's what we are doing. And we are putting the structure around it because people are waking up. More and more people are going vegan because they know that this is what's going on, right? As more and more vegans sprout around the world, the current system cannot tolerate that. It doesn't have veganism as a valid way of living within the current system because then you stop getting sick. If you stop getting sick, who's going to,
It's not profitable.
Yeah, it's not profitable anymore. So then the entire economy will collapse, right? So then we have to organize ourselves around our ecological responsibilities. And we have all of those, right? So then it becomes cleaning up. So those will be the kind of tasks that we will be doing. But everything will have to be different from what it is now. It's no longer about advertisements driving the entire economy, right? Which is what we have today. People are being, people are being, corporations are creating products and then persuading people, to buy my product, buy my product. And there's all these competing voices saying, buy my product. And it's all about, take this, you need this, you need this, you need this. And they're trying to they're lying to us and telling us we need something when we really don't. I mean, we know it's going to make us sick, right?
It's a very big lie.
Yeah.
So could you share with us how effective reforestation can be?
Well, that's the beauty of what I'm finding out is that when you go to centers of small it may not be huge, okay, but like a national forest or places where there are some animals still left, and then you literally give that land back to nature. Okay, when you just leave it alone and you say, I'm not going to touch it, and we have done that in small patches. So we know that the national forests are being maintained by the forest department, which is in the pockets of corporations. Okay, so we know that even though they're saying it's natural and they're leaving it alone, they are using it. So if you take, like in India, a couple from New Jersey went there and they bought this coffee plantation in a place called Coorg, where there are 3 national forests around it. It was a private land. So they bought this coffee plantation of about 250 acres they have today, and they just tore down the fences and let the animals from the national forest come in and do whatever they wanted to do.
That's beautiful.
So the animals realized that they were safer in this private sanctuary than they were in the national forest. So they started coming here, and then they started dropping their seeds, and the forest came back. I mean, it is so amazing when you go there and you realize this happened in the last 20 years.
That is so amazing, but not surprising.
So nature is ready to heal. So just like, someone who has blocked arteries and who's about to be wheeled into an operating theater for a triple bypass surgery, you put that person on a plant-based diet, a whole food plant-based diet, and you watch him heal, literally heal, from close to death back to life. You see that happening day in and day out with the patients today, right?
Yes, you do.
Same thing can happen with the earth. So you have this if we are close to death, we're killing it, we're almost there. You have another 7 years, if we continue doing this, we can kill almost everything off. But if we stop and give land back to nature, which is what happens when it'll come back, and animals will bring it back. Because you see, we haven't really wiped them all completely out yet, right? So the animals, they have the capacity to bring it back. So I tell people there is a cure for climate change. When the forests come back, the amount of carbon that gets sequestered in the forest will be greater than the amount of carbon that we added to the atmosphere since 1750. So literally we can reverse climate change, okay? So there is a cure for climate change. It's not just patching up the symptoms, which is what Al Gore is trying to do. You know, when you put just solar panels all around, you're not addressing the core problem. You're only patching up the symptoms, saying it won't get any worse than what it is today.
And so this is climate healers' mission, is to to tilt the climate enough so that we can ultimately prevent this great loss of biodiversity.
Right. So 1/6 of the land area, our calculation is that if 1/6 of the land area of the planet that is currently being used for grazing animals and for animal agriculture, if that is returned back to nature and the original forests that were there is brought back, that can sequester the excess carbon we have added to the atmosphere, and it will bring us back to the safe zone where nature can flourish, the climate will be back to normal, and we can flourish as well along with nature.
That's beautiful. And these forests will also attract rain.
Right.
Will help reverse these drought conditions we're experiencing as well, which is something I would like to talk about in the future. You know, we think rainforests are rainforests because it rains a lot in the rainforest. Well, actually, forests attract more rain.
Right.
So
creates
that's
the
a
rain.
beautiful thing too.
Creates the rain. So yeah, this is so we are saying, you know, a vegan lifestyle, if the world goes vegan, we can literally cure climate change. It will heal the climate, just like a person going on a plant-based diet heals heart disease.
So the message here is we are the climate healers.
Right. It's us. Not only, you know, when people ask me how many people work for climate healers, I tell them 7.6 billion.
That's absolutely beautiful.
This is who we are. We have always been climate healers. So we have kept the temperature we did keep the temperature constant over the first 10,000 years. Our ancestors did that. And then we have built all the tools and technologies we need now to keep the temperature constant forever. So we have been climate healers all along.
Beautiful. So I'd like to ask my guests, what daily practices do you recommend for our listeners today?
Oh, the number one thing we need to do is to go vegan. There are lots of resources around on the internet to help you do that, to go on a plant-based diet, to go on a whole foods plant-based diet if that's possible. And I say it's, you know, as local as possible, as organic as possible, and vegan eating. So that's local, organic, vegan eating is love, right? That's, to me, is the fundamental thing that we all need to be doing. And beyond that, I say, you know, please forgive yourself. Please become compassionate to yourself first. For whatever has happened, whatever you thought was going wrong, or whatever, you know, just forgive yourself and move on and join us and recognize that you have been a climate healer all along.
And how might our listeners address the opposing viewpoints of those who do not think a change is warranted?
Well, usually the stories that are being told are told by the people who have power in the current system. And the people who have power in the current system are scared that the system, when it changes, they may not have the same power. So they are clearly, you know, they are trying to frighten us into saying, oh, it'll never change. Nothing will ever change. And to me, that is not reality, okay? Change is the only thing that's constant in the universe. In fact, exponential change is the only thing that's constant in the universe. These are the only things that we remember, the exponential changes. In 1995, nobody even knew what the internet was. Very few people knew that. And there was an article in Newsweek saying this new thing they're talking about, the internet. They're saying that who's going to buy things on the internet? Who's going to read stuff off the internet? It's going nowhere. And within 8 years, I overheard someone say, I don't think I can live without the internet. And we now have created all the technologies we need to create a much more decentralized system. Put everything down on the table and say, yeah, we have to transition to a vegan world out of necessity because we want to survive. It's a matter of life and death. And therefore, how do we get there, right? So we know what to do. We know who has to do it. We know when we have to do it. We know why we have to do it, and we know where to do it.
It has been such a pleasure having you as my first guest. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for this interview. I think you've helped me a lot, and thank you for doing what you're doing. And we are all in this together. We're going to be marching along together.
Dr. Sailesh Rao is also the author of Carbon Yoga and Carbon Dharma. To learn more about his research and efforts, check out climatehealers.org. Today, Dr. Rao helped us to realize that we already are the climate healers. Remember, there is a root wisdom we all share. It is an unshakable wisdom that reminds us of who we truly are. The sadness, grief, and despair we may feel when we see what is happening to our planet, our home, is actually a beautiful thing because it tells us that we still love the earth. I am on this journey right alongside all of you because I still feel that grief and despair at times too. Thank you for joining me on this journey to connecting to our wild origins, our wild roots. Like the caterpillar, we are coming into being with purpose, emerging anew. The awakened butterfly is the state of our true selves. We are the climate healers and have always been. Thank you.